It's now Michael Knowles, host of the Michael Knowles Show. Good morning there, Michael. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing very well. Great to be with you.
Appreciate you coming on. So, got a little bit of time here. We'll get right to it. Looking at this walking back by the Biden administration of this radical book, a handbook that was included in the Department of Education's guidance on reopening the schools. I don't think this was walking back. This was intentional. This was planted. This is the objective. This is the agenda. They're joined at the hip with this effort. Your thoughts?
Well, I have to depart from some of my fellow conservatives who have been complaining for the past year or so that the schools have been shut down and this is really terrible and we need to reopen the schools. I sort of consider shutting down the public schools to be the silver lining in the storm cloud of coronavirus because obviously it's very, very cruel to keep kids away from their friends. But we know that so much of what kids are being taught in public and even in private schools is really radical, false, anti-American, wicked stuff. And the Biden administration and so many of the government agencies have supported this. I mean, for goodness sakes, you're seeing radical critical race theory materials in the military training books now. You're seeing it throughout the institutions. And so obviously we need to wield some political power because if we permit this poison to continue to permeate our schools and our institutions, we're not going to have a country left in the long term.
And the conflict to me, Michael, is even though they're trying to sort of distance themselves and come out and backtrack on this. The fact is, the president signed an executive order just a few weeks ago where he essentially sanctions and directs and orders discrimination across, as the document says, all levels of government.
No, of course. I mean, the left in this country has supported that sort of thing for a very long time. And I think what they're noticing now is that the polling does not look great on this issue. I mean, Joe Biden began his presidential campaign with the lie that Donald Trump told white supremacists fine people at Charlottesville. Didn't happen. But that was the very first words of his presidential campaign. And he continues to repeat this idea that America is an irredeemably tainted nation from the original sin of slavery, that racism is the defining feature. And it's not just Biden, it's the entire left. But I think what you're seeing right now, especially at these school boards, where parents of all races, of all demographics, are showing up and saying, get this trash out of our schools. You're seeing that there's a huge disconnect between the liberal elite, and notably the Biden administration, and ordinary Americans on the issues not just of critical race theory, but of the radical gender policies, of immigration, of voting rights. There's a huge disparity now. And so if Democrats don't want to get blown out of the water in 2022, one, they're going to need to keep a lot of their unfair voting practices in place. But two, they're going to have to run away from the policies that they've embraced for the past several years.
Yeah, it actually is good to see. And so here's the irony. For how long, Michael, have we heard from the education community, hey, the key to really successful education and boosting the quality of education is getting parents involved, right? Now they're getting involved, all right. They're telling you, is that not the case? We've heard that for decades. We need more parental involvement.
This was another silver lining, I think, of the COVID lockdowns, is that when kids went to their fake digital Zoom school, parents were very often in the room. And school district after school district, you'd see missives go out saying, hey, let's make sure that the parents aren't spying in on too much of what we're teaching their kids. And this is, frankly, the issue at play in my new book, Speechless, is how the left very subtly, very gradually transformed all of the standards and transformed our institutions. The fact is, a third grade classroom is not going to be a free marketplace of ideas. Okay, you're not going to debate all sorts of advanced things. You're going to teach kids nuts and bolts. And the question is, who has the right to set the curriculum? Is it some extremist radicals who are teaching things that ultimately undermine a kid's education, namely that their faculties of reason are fake and there's no such thing as objective truth? Or is it going to be the parents and the community and the taxpayers and the trustees and the people who pay attention to this sort of thing? So I think it's very important for the right, for conservatives, and even people in the middle to reassert their political power and say, no, radicals, we're not going to allow you to brainwash our kids from preschool all the way through college.
Last I checked, there are some 153 school board members across this country that are elected that are in process of being recalled, or there are recall efforts that are being ginned up against them right now. So, yeah, they're getting involved when they find out what these folks are truly all about. It's disgusting, but it is refreshing to see parents. We've shared many audio clips here on the show of parents showing up at these meetings and speaking out. And even though they're trying to say, well, no, we're really not doing that, they're bringing like examples where they've made posters, they've shot screenshots of the textbooks or the Zoom screens, as you just referenced. It's crazy. Gonna pivot a second. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
So you're going to hear this. You've heard it already many times. That critical race theory is only being taught in law schools. It's not being taught to your kids. There is a school district in Missouri that just spent $15,000 to a critical race theory professor to audit and redesign the history curriculum. This is happening in schools all over the country. It is being taught to your kids. Don't let them gaslight you.
Well, the thing about it is, I don't care if they call it polka dot. I mean, it doesn't really matter what they call it. They say, well, critical race theory is just the examination of the influence and race of our justice systems, our social constructs, our economic system, et cetera. Well, no, we're not just examining it. We're indoctrinating you to this ideology is what we're doing. So it's just semantic name playing is all it is. So what about the Democrats on their recent junket, their drunken junket up to D.C.? What the heck is that accomplishing?
Well, you see, they were protesting a new law. They were actually violating the law themselves. They do not have the right to abscond from the legislature just because the people didn't elect enough of them to impede this voter integrity law. So they were violating the law to protest a vote that would require voters to show ID at the polls. So what's the first thing they do? They go to the liquor store, they show their ID, and they buy a case of Miller Lite, and they jump in a private jet. They don't wear any masks, even though there's a federal mask mandate on the plane. I think it's a ridiculous mandate, but it shows you the hypocrisy. They land in D.C. They all get COVID, not all of them, but a huge number of them. They meet with legislators on Capitol Hill. They meet with people in the White House. A lot of them get COVID as well. Now the White House won't even release the COVID numbers, which frankly I think is perfectly fine because for the vast majority of people, COVID's not a very big deal if you're not in an at-risk group. But of course, the White House is simultaneously saying that we've all got to lock down again and we all have to wear masks again. So I think truly no political stunt has backfired more than the drunken junket we've seen in Texas, not in recent memory.
Unbelievable. So checking on your Twitter feed, Michael, and I've been following you for some time. But what about this video that you shared? You may have retweeted that includes numerous young folks from across the pond calling for the reinstatement of the Latin Mass, the traditional Latin Mass in the Catholic Church. I grew up Catholic, born and raised, went to Catholic school. I remember the days when after school, when you were studying to be an acolyte, the nuns would make us kneel on the concrete and learn the entire Mass in Latin, in like the second, third grade, trying to say all those crazy Latin words. What do you think about that?
So when I grew up, the Latin Mass had already basically been banned. It was not permitted.
Vatican II, I think.
The reforms of the Second Vatican Council. And so I grew up with a much less reverent liturgy. It was very confusing. I was an atheist for 10 years. I did revert to the faith. Zeal of a convert, but I myself was a revert. And in the meantime, Pope Benedict was a very, very good, serious, traditional, brilliant pope. He reauthorized the use of the Latin Mass. And one thing I've noticed, I've been to a lot of Latin Masses around the country. I've been to a lot of new Masses with less reverent liturgy. And the irony is, we are told that we need the new Mass with all the acoustic guitars and stuff, because that's what's going to attract the youths. But the reality is that I think the median age in the Latin Mass is about 28, and they've all got 20 kids somehow. I don't even know how that's possible.
Right.
And then you go to the new Mass, and the median age is 82, and there isn't a kid in sight. Actually, I think young people want orthodoxy. They want seriousness. They want truth. They don't want pie-in-the-sky, mealy-mouthed stuff. They want something to hold on to. This is even beyond the Catholic Church. They want something to hold on to and say, this is objectively real, this is objectively false. I mean, in our culture right now, you're not even permitted to say that a man is not a woman. And so I think
unbelievable.
If conservatives are going to have a way forward, we've got to state plain truths and have the courage to stand by them.
We got a break. We're honored to have you on. Can you stick with us for another segment?
Absolutely.
That's great. Michael Knowles, host of the Michael Knowles Show, is our guest. We'll be right back on the JT Show. Stay with it. We've got Michael Knowles, host of the Michael Knowles Show, on the show. So, Michael, disturbed by the Biden administration seemingly colluding with the social media platforms. I mean, Jen Psaki, White House press secretary, she doesn't even try to hide it. She just comes right out. Yeah, we're working with them. We're asking them to send content. We're going to pass it on to our Surgeon General for approval and vetting and so forth. I mean, today it's information concerning vaccines. Tomorrow, what is it? That's the concern.
You know, usually the liberal establishment is on the same page. They get the same talking points every morning. But on this issue, they've really been off tone.
Yeah.
Because you'll recall a couple of weeks ago, President Trump filed a lawsuit against big tech. And he said specifically that big tech had violated his First Amendment rights. And all the geniuses of the liberal establishment came out and said it's a frivolous lawsuit because the First Amendment doesn't apply to private companies. So as long as the private company is just upholding its own standards, they're not infringing on his First Amendment rights. The only way that the big tech companies could be said to have violated the First Amendment rights is if they are working at the behest of the government. And so what does the Biden administration do? They come out and say, of course they're working at the behest of the government. And they apply a lot of pressure. And they say now, Jen Psaki is coming out and saying that if you're deplatformed from one social media site, you should be deplatformed from all of them, that you should be deplatformed if you spread misinformation, which tends to be defined as anything that contradicts the official narrative. Frankly, the greatest misinformers in the whole topic of COVID are the people on the left who told us first masks don't work, then masks work, then you're at a great risk of the virus, then it didn't come from the Wuhan lab, then it wasn't man-made. It was all these lies. And so I think they're really shooting themselves in the foot. The only question is, do the courts have the integrity to come out and stand against this sort of thing and defend President Trump?
Yeah, and there's even a couple of Democrats now in Congress that are introducing legislation to address Section 230, and that's driven by this vaccine misinformation, the way they see it. But you know it won't just stop there, and that's not the intent. The intent is to weaponize social media as a surrogate, as just a sounding board for the Democrat Party. That's what they see. They see control of that ultimately.
Well, of course. And the problem here, by the way, is the topic of my book, Speechless. The problem is that if you control speech in a republic such as ours, you're not just controlling one aspect of the society. Good old Uncle Aristotle reminds us that man is the political animal because we have speech. And in a country such as ours, we persuade one another, we govern ourselves by speaking, by communicating and persuading and deliberating. So regardless even of the pressure from the government, if 3 billionaires in Silicon Valley, led by hipster Rasputin Jack Dorsey, can deplatform the duly elected sitting president, you know, if they control 90% of the flow of information around the internet, that is by definition a political act, and they are controlling the political system, and we the people have every right to push back against that.
And it crosses the constitutional line, however, when it's done at the behest and coercion by the government. I mean, that's clearly a violation of the Constitution. And that's where we are today. And they just seem to not really be too concerned about that. And when the press secretary says, yeah, we're doing that, that's bothersome.
Well, because who's going to stop them? I mean, they have flouted the rule of law for obviously many months now during the coronavirus lockdown nonsense. But this is just the apotheosis of something that's been going on for decades. The left has led a war of position, a long march through the institutions. They've taken over every institution. For goodness sakes, even the military has gone woke now, and they're pushing all sorts of crazy commercials and recruitment ads. And so you look at someone like Dr. Fauci, who's caught in multiple lies. He very likely perjured himself. And he says, so what? What are you going to do about it? It's shameless, but the fact is they've got the political power and the rest of us do not.
It's the risk of these career bureaucrats such as Fauci who really just don't have any risk. They can do pretty much whatever they want. They're still going to be employed. They're still going to draw their generous pay. They're still got all their benefits lined up. And it's just, it doesn't work that way in the private sector. The market will punish you if you do stuff like that. There are no consequences. They do it with impunity, and I think that's what concerns most Americans. Democrats' role in this crime wave that's just sweeping this country. This is another situation. So there's no chaos at the border. Crime is really not a problem. Oh, there's no inflation. In fact, Joe says we're going to spend more money to fix the inflation problem. And these extended unemployment benefits are not contributing to the labor shortage. I mean, it's just a state of denial coming out of the White House and the Democrat Party in general. But this crime problem is disturbing. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we need to call all the geniuses from Yale and Harvard and all the experts to do a study, because it's just so strange. Last year, the Democrats around the country defunded the police departments. They called at the national level to abolish the police. And so you get fewer cops with less money, and then the crime goes up. I don't get it. I'm trying to put it together. It's too complicated maybe for me. It turns out that when you incentivize certain behavior, you get more of it. And when you punish other behavior, you get less of it. And so what happened over the past year is we punished the cops and we let all the criminals who burned the country down in the BLM riots off of the hook. And surprise, surprise, shootings are up, murders are up, and theft and all other sorts of crimes. Same thing at the border. I mean, we now have historic levels of illegal immigrants pouring over. We had 188,000 foreign nationals illegally enter our country in the month of June, over 1 million so far this year, on track at least to hit 2 million. These numbers are insane. The vast majority of Americans oppose that. According to a Harvard-Harris poll, the vast majority of Americans want to drastically reduce not just illegal, but legal immigration, too. We're just taking in way too many people. And yet the liberal establishment doesn't care. It gets back to the Fauci problem. Presidents come and go, but Fauci remains. He's unaccountable. He's well ensconced in power. This is true of the whole liberal establishment that wants to get rid of our voter integrity laws, wants to flood our country with illegal aliens, and doesn't want to enforce the law against the police. So, yeah, it's unpopular in the polls, but the fact is they've got so much power that it's very hard to impede their agenda.
And the hypocrisy of this promotion, of course, of folks getting vaccinated and in the prospect of imposing more COVID protocols. But at the border, we just let folks in, and now reports suggest that there's like a 900% increase in COVID infections of those coming across the border. And we don't even test for that matter. And we don't do anything to quarantine them. And that's just what we know about. It's just so hypocritical. Are people getting tired of this? How will all this play out, do you think, Michael, in the 2022 midterms?
Well, it's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. It's the Democrats saying that there is one set of standards for them and there's another set for everyone else. It does expose, though, that, of course, they're not particularly concerned about the coronavirus. They jump on the Booze Cruise private jet and fly without any masks. And it's frankly, it's no big deal. They're all basically fine. And so they tell us that our 6-year-olds can't go to school, you can't leave your home, you can't go to church or your business, but illegal aliens can come in without any tests, and it surges 900%. And nobody cares. Yeah. It's less about the facts that they are trying to convey and more about the imposition of the rules themselves. The rules are going to change, but who wields the power and who rules us, that is not going to change anytime soon.
So what do you think then about 2022? Do you think this and this wokeness that's just permeating every corner of society that the Democrats seem to be fully on board with, is this going to have an impact at the polls?
If we're able to restore any of the election integrity laws that the Democrats, in some cases illegally, got rid of in 2020 using COVID as an excuse, if we're able to restore some of those election integrity laws, I think that we're going to have an incredibly strong year in 2022. All of the polling suggests that. You're seeing majority support for Republican policies, the likes of which we haven't seen in generations. But a lot of the question is going to come down to, will the Democrats be able to federalize elections? They're trying to do that right now because they're afraid that they're going to lose their unfair advantage. Will they be able to have widespread mail-in without voter identification, with ballot harvesting, huge, horrifically corrupt practices? If they're able to maintain that, then I think they probably have a fighting chance because they'll be able to suppress the will of the American people.
The universal mail-out and the subsequent ballot harvesting, in my view, is the greatest opportunity to commit fraud and the thing I object to the most, that they want to federalize and make a requirement in every single state. Does that concern you, that approach?
It doesn't just concern me. It doesn't just concern you. It concerned Barack Obama 5 or 6 years ago.
That's right. That's right.
Give an advantage to Republicans.
That's exactly right.
It's rich and it's preposterous. I mean, they're pretending that there's no risk here. Even Democrats for many, many decades knew that there was a great risk, and that's the point. That's what they're after.
Michael, it has been an honor and a pleasure having you on the show today, sir. We hope you'll come back. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you very much.
Michael Knowles, host of the Michael Knowles Show, author of the book Speechless. Thanks a lot, Michael. We'll talk to you soon. We'll be right back with the JT.